got some stipulations as to what, I guess, for lack of better terms, limitations that the court has, if the court is willing to accept us. What we've worked out is that the state of Florida is going to be waiving the sentencing guidelines. The maximum amount of incarceration the court may impose is 828 days. That's 2.268 years. The defendant's going to be waiving PSI and PDR. Their standard costs, $100 cost of prosecution, $100 cost of investigation to the Volusia County Sheriff's Office. As for the rest of the agreement, it's essentially at the court's discretion. One thing that we did talk about is a withhold of adjudication. The state's going to have no problem with the court giving a withhold of adjudication in this case, as long as it is a probationary sentence and no incarceration. If that
otherwise be illegal.
That is correct, and that is why that is the stipulation. But as for what the sentence would be, both sides are going to be presenting some evidence to the court. If I can have Mr. Forrest join me at the podium.
Can I clarify one thing? It's about the withholding adjudication with probation. The state is stipulating that the defense can argue in court, and the court, in its discretion, can give it. Not saying the state's agreeing that that's what it should be or what we're going to suggest. Just that it's an option for the court.
Right. And so, as I understand it, it's basically a waiver of guidelines with a cap, a ceiling of 828 days.
That's correct.
Of incarceration. There is no ceiling on the statutory ceiling on any probationary sentence.
Probation, but on incarceration.
Yes, the probation is up to discretion of the court in that probation.
All right. Did we swear in Mr. Forrest? Mr. Forrest, raise your right hand. And if I can have the plea form.
I believe I put a score sheet up on the bench earlier.
It is still there. All right, state your name, please.
Brian Forrest.
And Mr. Forrest, how old are you?
I am 21 years old.
How far did you go in school?
I graduated high school and started college.
Do you read, write, and understand English?
I did.
Did you read this written plea form?
I did.
And have you had sufficient time to consult with your counsel both about your charges, any potential defenses, and the conditions of this plea?
I did.
Do you understand all those very important rights you would be waiving by changing your plea today?
I did.
Do you have any questions about what the parameters of this, I'm going to call it a conditional plea because there are parameters. I've got some discretion within that. Do you have any questions about what those parameters are?
No, Your Honor.
Are you under the influence of alcohol or substances?
No, Your Honor.
Do you have any conditions or take any medication that affects your ability to understand what we are doing today?
No, Your Honor.
And you understand if I were to adjudicate you guilty, if you are not a U.S. citizen, you will be deported?
Yes, Your Honor.
As to the charge of accessory after the fact to a life felony, which the underlying felony is that second-degree murder charge, which is an accessory after the fact is a second-degree felony, punishable by up to 15 years in prison. How do you plead?
No contest.
Has anyone offered you anything in exchange for your plea?
No, Your Honor.
Has anyone forced you or coerced you in any way to change your plea here today?
No, Your Honor.
Are you changing your plea because you believe it is in your best interest to do so? Factual basis.
Judge, we will absolutely stipulate that there is a factual basis.
We're going to be laying some of the judgment on the actual sentencing proceedings.
All right. And counsel, you agree I can rely on the documents in the court file sentencing hearing?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and I do find there is a factual basis for the court to accept the plea. I do find Mr. Porras is entering this plea freely and voluntarily and intelligently with the assistance of counsel, and I will accept that plea. Mr. Porras, you understand that because you have no prior felonies and because of your age at the time of the when this incident occurred, you have a right not only to a pre-sentence investigation, but also a what we call a predisposition report, which is the juvenile version of that, which is basically a background report collected by speaking to you, perhaps family members, potentially next of kin to victim, state agencies, which gives the court some additional information about your background. And for me to proceed with sentencing today, it is my understanding you are waiving your right to those background reports. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you had enough time to talk to your lawyers about that specific issue so you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and I do find that waiver as well is freely and voluntarily entered. So at this point, we will move forward with sentencing. Mr. Porras, if you would have a seat and state.
Thank you, Your Honor. The judge, at some point before the hearing is over, I'm going to move everything in evidence that I've provided to the court for the court's review prior to this hearing, and I'll identify them once we get them marked before we're done. Here's one additional item that we will publish to the court at some point today. And the first judge, the state would call Sergeant Cameron Tucker to the stand to testify.
All right, sir, just stop at the podium to be sworn. Raise your right hand.
Do solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony given in this house is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Judge, may I move the podium a little bit? Thank you, sir. All right, proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
Sir, could you please introduce yourself to the court and state the spelling of your entire name?
Sergeant Cameron Tucker, C-A-M-E-R-O-N, Tucker, T-U-C-K-E-R,
And Sergeant Tucker, where are you employed, sir?
with the Volusia Sheriff's Office.
And I'm guessing your rank is sergeant.
Yes, sir.
What's your current assignment with the Volusia Sheriff's Office, sir?
I'm assigned as a detective sergeant over the Northwest area of the county.
And were you employed with the Sheriff's Office back in November of 2018?
Yes, sir.
Did you have a different rank at that time?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I was a detective.
And what division or area of the county were you assigned to, sir?
I was assigned to the Southwest Detectives Unit during that time.
And generally, what type of crimes were you investigating as a detective in that zone?
I was responsible for investigating persons, property crimes. I was also a reserve detective to respond and assist with homicide investigations.
And those are the investigations handled by the Major Case Unit?
Yes, sir.
And were you on duty or did you respond for an investigation on November 2nd of 2018?
Yes, sir.
And did this eventually become a homicide investigation?
Yes, sir.
Did you assist the Major Case Unit?
Yes, I did.
Were you one of the lead investigators on this investigation?
Yes, sir. I was assigned as the case agent with Sergeant Pagliari being the assistant case agent for this group.
That's Sergeant A.J. Pagliari.
Yes.
Could you tell the court how you first became involved in this investigation on November 2nd of 2018?
I was on duty and on call for my district during that shift. I had received a call late that afternoon for a reported home invasion. I responded to 35 Alicante Road. the home was in complete disarray, at multiple points of entry. There was forced entry to the garage, pedestrian door. Upon entering the house, almost every cabinet was open, drawers were pulled out, articles of clothing, Tupperware from the kitchen area had been pulled out, stuff was out of place, there was random items that had been smashed, broken up, and pretty much anything that could be in order in the house was out of order. It was way over the top for any type of burglary investigation I had ever done in my career. In addition to that, there was some blood on the floor in the house, and due to the vehicle that was belonging to the victim who was missing at that time, who was running in the driveway, it became pretty apparent to me that this wasn't your average burglary, nor was it appearing to be a home invasion. And I began suspecting we might have a homicide.
Who called in this home invasion? Who called 911?
Mr. Ramos.
That's Gregory Ramos?
Yes, sir.
The charged co-defendant in this case.
Yes.
You said the van was out front and running.
Yes.
And you mentioned the point of entry, you said in the garage door?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe how there was forced entry at that door?
This is a pedestrian door, not your main garage door for a vehicle. It was on the side of the house. Had a standard aluminum garage door there, and the door frame had been split as if it had been forced open by some sort of brute force. The locking mechanism had been bent, and the metal that would be affixed to the door frame to have the latch and bolt there were pulled out.
And as part of your initial investigation and seeing what was going on at 35 Polycom, did officers speak with Gregory Ramos?
Yes, sir.
And did his statements begin to conflict in some ways? You don't have to go into detail, but did they appear to be inconsistent?
Yes, sir.
At some point, did he give a story regarding two individuals he was with the night before?
Yes.
And who were the two individuals that he named?
Dylan Sigleric and Brian Ford.
So it would be fair to say as this investigation is unfolding, you have a lot of different officers, detectives doing a lot of different things all over the county.
Yes, sir.
Did detectives or investigators from your office end up making contact with Mr. Sigleric and Mr. Forrest?
Yes, sir.
And was Mr. Ramos left at the scene at 35 Alacon, or was he taken somewhere by investigators?
He was brought to the office actually by his family. At that time, he was not in our custody. So his family accompanied him at the house, and then we moved them over to the district office.
And was an interview conducted of Mr. Ramos at the district office?
Yes, sir.
And was it Sergeant Pagliari who was primary investigator for that interview?
Yes.
And as that was going on, your agency, I think you already testified, that they were working on making contact with Sigleric and Forrest.
Yes, sir.
And you said they did make contact with Sigleric and Forrest.
At their respective homes.
And as the case agent, are you aware of these interviews and conversations with Mr. Sigleric and Mr. Forrest?
I am.
Let's start with Mr. Sigleric. What was he able to aid the investigation that day?
He was.
In what ways?
Initially, he was untruthful and tried to cover up for Mr. Ramos. But he eventually came forward and had expressed that he had been told by Mr. Ramos that Mr. Ramos had killed his mother and buried her at the River City Presbyterian Church off of Highbanks. And that he, Mr. Ramos, needed Mr. Squares and Mr. Force's help in staging the house to appear as if there had been a robbery.
That's the house at 35 Olive.
Yes.
Okay. Go on, sorry.
To cover up the murder. As a part of those duties, there were
property that had been taken from 35 Holocon?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit, but did Mr. Siglaric actually end up helping your agency and detectives from your agency locate some of these items that were taken from 35 Holocon?
Yes, he did.
Now, as the interview progressed with Mr. Gregory Ramos, at some point did he, when presented with his inconsistencies, did he make admissions to this homicide?
Yes, he did.
And could you just generally describe, doesn't have to be in great detail, what he admitted to?
Mr. Ramos admitted to strangling his mother to death and taking her away from the home and bringing her to the church, where he proceeded to bury her behind a outdoor seating area beneath a fire pit. Following that, he reached his two friends, Mr. Siglaric and Mr. Forrest, the following day at school, or before school he arrived there, and then told them what he had done and asked them for their help in covering it up by making the home appear as if a robbery had occurred and taking some of the property.
And once Mr. Ramos made this admission, Mr. Siglaric had been spoken to, Mr. Forrest had been spoken to, did the agency in fact locate and discover the victim's body at the church?
Yes, we did, with the help of Mr. Siglaric.
And where was the decedent located?
The decedent was located underneath a fire pit behind the church.
And were the items, some of the items taken from the house located in the church as well?
Yes.
Were items discovered anywhere else or found to be anywhere else that were taken from the home?
Yes, we found items not only behind the church, but in a dumpster behind a Winn-Dixie in Deltona, as well as property belonging to the victim at both Mr. Forrest's home and Mr. Siglaric's.
Now, having done the lead on the investigation and knowing the contents of the interviews as well as the physical evidence recovered from the various scenes, were you able to develop kind of a timeline of how things played out in terms of after the victim was killed? So from midnight of the second up until the 911 call.
Yes, sir.
With some of the items that you reviewed, did that include dumps from cellular phones?
Yes, sir.
And did that include cellular dumps from Mr. Ramos' phone?
It did.
And from Mr. Forrest's phone?
Yes, sir.
And was there any communication within those forensic downloads between Mr. Ramos, Mr. Forrest, in early morning hours, very early morning hours on the second?
Yes, just after midnight, Mr. Ramos attempted to contact Mr. Forrest via cell phone.
And do these forensic downloads give you durations of the call?
Yes, sir. If I remember correctly, I believe there was 3 calls, 2 of which were rather short, less than a few seconds, and one was approximately 50 seconds or so.
So in the less than a few seconds, what does that make you think? That the call's not connected?
Yes, sir.
Somebody doesn't answer that type of thing?
Yes, sir.
Was there also a text message sent from Mr. Ramos to Mr. Siglaric and Mr. Forrest later, but still in the early morning hours?
As I recall, yes.
And based upon your investigation, when did these 3 physically come together on the second?
From the timeline that I was able to put together, it would have been roughly after 0600 hours on their way to school.
And who was driving?
I believe it was Mr. Forrest.
Was it Mr. Forrest's vehicle?
Yes.
Did he pick up Mr. Siglaric?
As well as Mr. Ramos.
Do you recall how Mr. Siglaric and Mr. Forrest, particularly Mr. Siglaric, described Gregory Ramos when he was getting into that vehicle that morning?
Notably shaken.
Do you recall whether or not he mentioned the condition of his clothing?
That he was still quite soiled.
And what about any injuries that he those three, I think they picked up some girls too and gave them a ride to school.
After the boys, it appeared that the boys were picked up first and the girls following, just arriving at school.
And where did they go? So they go to school,
Yes.
and do they stay for the whole day based upon your investigation?
No, roughly 1 p.m., which would have been for that school schedule just after the fifth period, they all depart.
And so when you say they all, is that just the three young men we were talking about, Mr. Forrest, Mr. Ramos, and Mr. Surratt?
Yes, sir.
So the girls not with them at this point.
Not until my knowledge.
And are they still traveling in Mr. Forrest's vehicle?
Yes.
Where do they go based upon your investigation?
They went back to Mr. Ramos's house where they observed the home, and the quote was that it looked like a hurricane had blown through the house, and then they began to assist him by taking those items from the home and transported some of those items to the church for some of the items there to be discarded near the body.
So they go to 35 Olicon, see what's going on, the other two see what's going on, and then they take some items and go to the church.
Yes.
And is Mr. Ramos still with them?
Yes.
And is Mr. Forrest still driving his vehicle and transport?
Yes.
And was there a description of, given by the two co-defendants, Mr. Sickle, Mr. Sklar, and Mr. Forrest, of drag marks at the River City Church?
Yes, behind the church is a large parking lot that ends at a grass field, and then it begins to be partly melons and partly sand as it goes back to the lake. There's a lake back there. And they observed these drag marks in the soil leading back to the fire pit. And Mr. Ramos had explained to them that when he killed his mother, he had to drag her down that pathway to get her to the fire pit in order to bury her.
And to drag her, you describe fashioning anything to her legs in order to drag her down to the fire pit?
Yes, he had to take belts to use them as straps in order to be able to drag her.
And did Mr. Sklar describe in your investigation what Mr. Ramos did when they were at the church, putting the items in the woods and doing various things?
Yes, part of that was that they had to cover up the drag marks that were still visible, and then they were discarding property into the woods near the body, as well as Mr. Ramos actually waded out into this lake to sink a chest full of property that had been removed from the house.
And we'll jump back all the way back to when they first get in the car, and when Mr. Ramos gets in the car in the early morning hours before school. Based upon your investigation, the interviews conducted, did Mr. Ramos inform these two young men what he had done to his mother when he got in the car?
Yes, he had told them something to the effect of, I really did, I killed my mother.
So after they're at the church with these items, do they end up going back to 35 Olicon?
Yes.
And what additional things happen inside that address when the three gentlemen go back?
During that time is when they made sure that the home would appear as if an incident such as a robbery or home invasion had occurred, and then they received the additional property to be removed that they were to hold on to make it, the theft part seem real.
You said the house was already messed up a bit earlier,
Yes.
so they messed it up some more.
Yes.
Is this when, it's your understanding that the forced entry was, made it seem like a forced entry in that garage door?
Yes.
And who was it that made that, I guess it made that look like forced entry?
To the best of my recollection, it was the three of them in concert. They planned to figure out how they were going to do it and then acted upon it.
Then that afternoon is when the 911 call is made by Mr. Ramos.
Yes, Mr. Ramos gives them the property that's to be removed, which is some electronic items, a guitar, other tangible things. And then they leave, they being Mr. Sigler and Mr. Porras, and from there, Mr. Ramos calls 911.
And
is the dumpster where some of the property was discarded by Mr. Siglerick and Mr. Porras.
This is the Winn-Dixie Overflow only, did you say?
Yes, sir.
Is this a picture of the inside of that dumpster?
Yes, sir.
And are these photographs of the specific items that were located inside the dumpster?
Yes, sir.
One of the next folder here. Photographs, so these photographs from Mr. Forrest's home?
Yes, sir.
And are we looking at a property that was taken for $35?
Yes, sir.
Is this one depicting, pointing out the police station up there?
I believe so, yes.
This one, is this in reference to the radio and speakers?
Yes, sir.
This next group of photographs, where are these from?
That is from 35 Alicante.
And this first picture in this exhibit, does this kind of show that, is this the door that you're talking about in the garage with those forced entry on?
Yes, I refer to it as the pedestrian garage door.
Thank you, sir. Is this where you were describing how the lock was, the locking mechanism was, the jar mechanism was broken?
Yes.
I think there's just a few more pictures of the door. And the rest of these photographs, they depict accurately the condition that that home was found when the 911 call was made and made the law enforcement responded.
Yes, sir.
And was this mess pretty much consistent throughout the house?
Yes.
And this last batch of photographs, are these from River City Church?
Yes, sir.
And what are we kind of looking at in this picture? Can you give us any reference points?
This would be the western entrance to the church off of High Banks,
So is High Banks right now, right behind the,
where the person taking the picture is standing.
you know, these simply, these next couple photos, just moving back towards the parking lot behind the church?
And moving due south toward the lake behind the church.
Would it be fair to say the trail that you were talking about, the drag marks, is down in this direction here?
Yes, sir.
Is this the trail?
Yes, sir.
And what are we looking at in this picture?
That is the outdoor pulpit, if you will, for the church. And you're facing south, but to, we call it the, well, I guess that's actually more east, southeast, so to the right of that picture is where the burn pit is.
So is it fair to say the burn is back to the woods this way?
Yes, sir.
And what's here in the background you can kind of see?
A lake.
And is that the lake that Mr. Ramos submerged items?
Yes.
Is this the fire pit you've been referencing?
It is.
And it's hard to see, but can you see anything in this photograph?
A human toe.
Is it fair to say that the victim's body was not very deep?
It was not.
And here, what are we looking at?
We are looking at the decedent's lower half, specifically her legs, and those are the belt straps that were utilized to drag her from the vehicle down the pathway to the burn pit.
Is this one of the items you found in the woods around the burn pit, around the fire pit?
Yes, sir.
as you were investigating that day on the 2nd, did there come a time that Mr. Horace and Mr. Sicolari were both at River City Church?
Yes, sir.
And were they in close proximity to one another?
They were in the same car.
And as part of an investigation, we decided to put a recording device in the back of that vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Did that recording device capture conversations between Mr. Sicolari and Mr. Horace?
It did.
Have you listened to that entire audio recording in preparation for your hearing today?
I have.
What is the today? About how long is the entire audio recording?
Roughly 55, 58 minutes.
And did you actually become aware of what was going on in the back of that patrol car that night as the investigation was going on?
I did. The patrol deputy who had them in her vehicle called me.
And why did she call you?
She called me because she was horrified at the behavior that the two were exhibiting in her back seat.
And before we get into that behavior a little bit, as the case agent, one of the two case agents in this case, do you have a viewpoint of who was more helpful to your investigation the day of November 2nd, the night of November 2nd, 2018, between the two co-defendants, Mr. Sicolari and Mr. Horace?
I do.
And what is your perspective on that?
My perspective is that Mr. Sicolari
Objection, relevance.
State.
But it goes to the sentence the court should impose in the cooperation of Mr. Horace, which I'm sure is going to be argued by the defense.
Objection overruled.
You can answer the question.
Yes.
My perception is that Mr. Sicolari ultimately was more helpful throughout the investigation.
So generally, what was on that audio recording? What was recorded in the back of that vehicle?
Initially, the two discussed what they had told the police, and then after that, the two sing for quite some time to songs, as well as make jokes and talk about other things at school, and the fact that they felt that they shouldn't go down for this, and that they should have a light sentence, and it wouldn't be on their record.
And now, to give the court a little proximity where they're located at the church and what's going on around that patrol vehicle as they're having these conversations.
The car was specifically backed up to the edge of the asphalt where we saw the picture where it begins to be grass to the trail. The patrol vehicle is backed up there, so it's facing high banks. They're in the back seat, and directly behind them in the woods is where Ms. Kleppner has just been found buried. During that time, several law enforcement officers are out there. At one point, Mr. Ramos is brought to the scene as well to show us. And there's a set of deputies that are guarding the end of the vehicle.
At the point that they're in the back of the car, had Gail even been exhumed yet from the shallow grave?
No.
All right, I'm going to move states 2 into evidence as a living photograph of this Gail Kleppner.
Without objection, admitted the state's exhibit 2,
It's the same one I provided.
and I have reviewed previously.
May I approach the witness with states B?
Yes.
Sorry, you said you reviewed the entire hour. Did you also review they edited or redacted version of their conversations in the back of the patrol car?
Yes, sir.
And did that fairly and accurately represent portions of their conversation that you described in the report here today?
You did?
How many voices do you hear on that audio recording? The portion that you heard, the short portion.
2.
And when I started the audio recording, would you be able to identify whose voice is whose?
Yes.
Does that audio recording fairly and accurately represent, again, the short portion of this audio recording?
It does.
Other than being redacted for length, has it been altered
channel with Krista. And I was eating mac and cheese watching Doctor Who. And I'd fallen asleep. And then I hear, tuk, 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 tuk. Detectives. I'm like,
So is that Mr. Morris?
It is.
motherfucker, I was sleeping. You don't interrupt me while I'm sleeping.
Dude, no, like, okay,